There isn't Martin.
And there's Martin.
Hello.
Hello, Martin.
Rhea was here.
Hello.
She just went for a brief, I don't know, break of something. So I had to laugh when I read good old Bloom's taxonomy again.
Yes, yes.
So the Algerians are just obsessed with it. Last week I found, some free webinar from somebody on Bloom's taxonomy, and I posted it in their Facebook group, and they were so happy. I don't know if anyone watched it. They just like to see the words Bloom's taxonomy. That's a good day for them.
Well, I do a course in software evaluation.
Oh, yeah?
It's called Computer Literacy B. But so basically they take on 16 total different softwares in 4 different areas. And the overarching kind of thing is to develop your evaluation skills. And, I start out with something simple like a movie or a TV show, and then we move on to software from there. But and then I gradually work up the Bloom's hierarchy. Start out with the description, and then we get into analysis, and that's really, really hard. The evaluation, or making a good evaluation, is also difficult in a different way, but the analysis part is really, really difficult for my students anyway in university. To be able to, and I explain it as you have to be able to take it apart and look at each part and then put it back together again. And they just really don't know how to do that without a lot of examples, and some never get it. But the evaluation is, again, difficult to do correctly. I mean, it's very easy to say I like it because of this and that, but after the analysis you have to be more expressive anyway. But that's my experience with Bloom.
So how about in your classes, either Rhea or Martin, do you, at least in your own mind, do you have a distinction between sort of lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills? And do you explicitly teach them or indirectly teach them, or is it something you look out for?
I think so. I mean, this is a big part of the core of my master's degree study, so I'm always thinking about it. But like, just to generalize, in Korea, the hardest thing is to break them of this like clinging need for perfectionism, lateral thinking, like, what do you mean? What could the right answer be? Like, they're so scared to just throw answers out there. I don't understand the concept of lateral thinking based on the education that they have grown up with. Like, not all of them, but like.
I found in Japan, my students, if I ever asked, oh, why do you think so? That to them was a cue that their answer was wrong.
And also the social environment of saving face and not being too much better than someone else or too much smart. Like, that's just, the first month of class is always just, by the time we get through mid-semester, it's a lot better, but that's
so
part of
what
it.
do you do that gets them from the terror and the awkwardness of the beginning to where they're okay in the middle?
I'm kind of a like drop the baby into the pool and make them swim kind of teacher. So basically I just get them talking and throw them into breakout rooms with questions, and I'll make those questions worth homework points, and I use the carrot of grades as much as possible because it's what works. But I don't know, if I was teaching students of other cultures, I'd probably have a really different method. I don't know. Like, I like to make major projects worth a lot of points that require a lot of critical thinking and creativity and collaboration when I can. But the trick is fitting that into the structure of a curriculum that I have to follow certain elements is always the hardest thing for me.
Right. Are you assigned a textbook to work with?
Well, part of the reason I'm leaving the place that I'm at is because it became a very structured, rigid system that we have to teach, and I'm not allowed to do certain things, so I'm leaving. And I don't 100% know a lot about the new place, but I do know that I have a book, but I think I have a bit of freedom to design like projects and homework and stuff, so I'm still figuring that out.
So when do you start the new job?
March. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'll be meeting up with the teachers, and I've had some long conversations with the head teacher so far. And some of the things, like, The place that I'm leaving has been a really great chance for me to get experience in certain ways,
Mhm.
but I feel like it's a bit of a whack-a-mole, like
Yeah.
don't stick out too much situation. Whereas the place that I'm going to seems to value all of my like the qualities that I want to develop more. And so I'm
Yeah.
kind of excited, but you
Better
never
fit.
know till
Yeah.
you're there, right? Yeah.
Mm.
I'm really excited.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
good time. This class is so I'm also working on a couple papers related to doing presentations
Mhm.
online with
Mhm.
ELT students. And I have a bunch of data, and I'd like to work a lot of these ideas into the paper as well. So
Nice, nice, nice.
I'm so glad to be here. But anyway, I'm like all over the place. Next.
Martin, do
Yeah.
you sort of, are you kind of thinking, how can I bring in analysis and whatnot into, or does it come up naturally, or?
I think sometimes you got to think about what level the learners are at. So, for example, when I look at what Penny's put in this book
Mhm.
about applications of critical thinking and so on, when I was reading it, I was thinking, is this really a critical thinking exercise in itself?
Mm. Yep.
I
Some
think
might claim,
or is it just harder
yeah.
to grade, right?
but like there's one example that I looked at, which is on page 13. The one that says these statements are illogical. Why?
Oh.
And the reason why, like, if I don't know if you've studied like social psychology or psychology,
Mhm.
but this goes into things like fundamental attribution error and
Mhm.
confirmation bias and
Mhm.
availability heuristics. And I think with my own learners, because they're all adults, because they're quite advanced, I do sometimes feel that I'm able to teach them that type of thing. I can teach them, okay, what is confirmation bias? I can teach them what is availability heuristic. Just
Mhm.
weave that in sometime, or maybe, just, abandon the plan. I can get away with doing that, maybe a bit more than Rhea. And, spend 20 minutes teaching them about, cognitive dissonance or something. And they appreciate that. And I think this goes back to something that Kevin mentioned. I think Rhea was kind of getting into it as well. There's the cultural aspects
Hmm.
of critical thinking. From Western cultures, I think that we often equate critical thinking with the scientific method.
Mhm.
Goes back to Francis Bacon, knowledge is power, and
Yeah.
how we, use evidence to. Hello, my daughter's here. Bye bye. They're going out. Bye bye. But the point I was making was that not so long ago, and I think I've got it in my bookshelf, but I'll maybe go get it later. There's a book that I read quite recently that's called Loon Shots, and I can't remember the name of the author. But in that book, he talks about something that's known as Joseph Needham's grand question, or
Mhm.
the Needham question. This is after a British scientist, actually. In the 1930s, he was a physicist. He was famous around the world. And then this Chinese student, I think she was a PhD student from Fudan University, went to study at Cambridge University, where he was based. And, she was expecting this grand old, wizard type professor to open the door. He was actually about 37 years old, this tall,
Wow. Yeah.
quite young looking man. And they ended up having an affair with the full knowledge of his wife. And so she taught him Chinese, and then she taught him about Chinese culture and philosophy. And Joseph Needham, this physicist, gave up on physics and then went to China and studied about, spent the rest of his life
My
studying
Needham
Chinese
question is,
philosophy.
what the heck was wrong with his wife? But anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, she was also a world famous physicist, in fact. But the point that I'm getting to is that Joseph Needham was comparing like Oriental, Chinese, Japanese, Korean culture with Western culture. And he was thinking, well, the Chinese invented gunpowder, they invented paper, they invented printing press so many thousands, hundreds of years before the West did. What was the reason why Western culture, expanded so much quicker than Chinese and Oriental cultures? And the answer to the question, according to the author of the book, whose name escapes me, is that it's down to the Western kind of critical thinking coming from scientific method.
Oh, huh.
That's, for example, with things like gunpowder, you know, the Chinese were using them for fireworks, and they were thinking of them as a beautiful thing to use at weddings and New Year celebrations. And the British and the French were taking gunpowder and using it to kill people.
So
Right,
they were less
right.
advanced than the Chinese.
So yeah, but you know, kind
So-
of thinking in different ways about what we
Yeah.
can do with this technology was what helped kind of Western conceptions
Reminds
of
me a bit of
critical
this
thinking.
cartoon of some medieval knights laying siege to a castle by putting themselves into an enormous pop-up toaster and launching themselves over the wall. And back beyond the toaster, the inventor of the toaster is saying to his friend, he says, my dream is that one day mankind will find a peaceful use for my machines. But yeah, fireworks would be better than guns.
Yeah.
Safi Bakal is his name.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing, and I like some of the ideas in Penny Ur.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then when I think of using it with my students as a double layer of obstacles, because they might not understand the vocabulary, and their
Mhm.
grammar understanding can limit them from getting to some of these questions. But I think some of them could be useful. And I've actually thought maybe it would be fun to just open every class with 5 minutes of critical thinking and then move on to stuff. Like maybe it doesn't have to be.
Or you could open every minute with every class with sort of 5 minutes of, you know, a logic puzzle or a word puzzle or of very different types, and then, you know,
Yeah.
see which ones resonate, which ones people like. I know with the Algerians, one of my frustrations has been that anytime they have a kind of what I would consider an assignment that would let them have a critical opinion, like an opinion essay or a book
Mhm.
report, they're told their conclusion. Like there's an assignment in the book about a book report, and step one is find a book, you know, you're going to write your book report together. So already weird. So you have to agree on a book that everybody likes. And say, well, why can't you write a book report on a report you don't like? Or they're given an opinion essay, but the book provides the topic sentence, and then they have to fill in. So a lot of the adjustment I'm trying to get them to do is to say, well, what if you kept the main structure of the book report, but let students work alone and have whatever opinion they want about the book? Maybe they'd like it, but maybe they wouldn't. Or maybe they can still write an essay on applying ancient civilizations to modern civilization. And that's the whole unit topic. It has to be ancient civilizations. But they might have their own thesis statement. And that's very hard for the Algerians to let go of that. And they're opposed to any kind of longer text, like a short story or a listening, that does not have a moral message. So Aesop's fables, those are great. Any kind of fairy tale or fable, those are great. But when I turn around and I talk to the students outside of class and I say, what do you do in English? And they're like, oh, I'm playing League of Legends with a bunch of people in Korea. I'm reading Stephen King novels in English. So their English outside of the class is actually higher level and more varied than that kind of narrow constraints of what they're getting inside class. And but then you kind of think, well, and who made your culture king? Maybe everything should have a moral message, and that's why they're having a more moral life than you are, you know. So there is that kind of, you know, how much Western imperialism should you bring with you when you go? But there's all these opportunities for critical thinking that are just nipped in the bud, because you got to have one answer. When classes have quote unquote debates and they're throwing out ideas, at the end, the teacher will tell them which ideas were best. And if they didn't come up with her ideas, she'll give them her ideas. And they're just always inserting her and herself. And I think that's kind of more a pedagogical mistake, really, than it is cultural, that kind of fear that if I don't control everything, it won't turn out okay.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's very hard for them to put students in groups and not hear the groups. I once asked a group of inspectors, I said, if people are in groups speaking in English, if students are speaking in English and the teacher doesn't hear them, does that English still count? And half of them said no.
Ooh, wow.
I went like, oh, you're wrong. The answer is yes.
That's a wrong answer. Yeah.
I did say that directly. You know, fortunately, I can. It's like, yeah, you're the wrong answer. So.
Oh, I think you totally nailed it with the fear of losing control. That's the key point that holds a lot of people back. Because like critical thinking dovetails really well with flipped learning and that whole model of sage on stage versus guide on the side. And like being able to trust that your students are going to go do stuff and that they can do stuff, and that, you know,
the
like
Algerians love that phrase. They're always talking about sage on the stage and guide on the side.
Right.
But they don't turn around and do it.
Yeah.
So we have the philosophical buy-in. It's just a lot of modeling. You know, I've been working with them so hard of, you know, how to set up a classroom so that students can work in groups. But it's just, you know, that you could trust your students to work by themselves. I did a number of observations in Chinese schools, in elementary, middle school, and high school. And their elementary school classes are like 60 students. And I'm sitting in the back. So if there's anything going on in the back, I'm going to see it. And they're on little islands, and they were completely in English the whole time. Teacher couldn't possibly have heard everything. But that the classroom culture was that you stay in English. And so everybody did.
Yeah, that fear of losing control. And also, I think all of us are guilty of not really having the level of self-awareness that we think we do or want to have. And it's, you know, I'm sure you guys have like videoed your own class and looked at it and gone, oh, okay, so that's what is really happening here. And when it comes down to measuring student talking time and teacher talking time is a really vital point. Like I've tried to work with other teachers and say, okay, look, you know, you can get more interaction happening if you actually do this and talk less. And they're like, yeah, I'm already doing that. And then I'll walk by their class and students are asleep and they're just lecturing at the front. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and for me too, like no one can ever see their own blind spots. That's the hardest thing to admit. And
they wouldn't be blind spots if you could see them.
And you don't want to be there when students ask you a question. You're like, actually, I don't know. I have to check that. Like, but when you do that in front of students, like it makes them go, whoa, you know, like I pulled the rug out from under this person. Like I feel like a magic man now.
But what great modeling of, you know, I don't know, but I'll find out. And I know how to find out. So
to let them know it's okay that you might not be totally omniscient and godlike sometimes.
Yeah.
Even though you're a teacher.
When I was looking at Penny's exercises, I guess I don't know that I'm convinced that a sentence like she, leave, put it in the past tense, and then complete to make a meaningful sentence. I mean, that will work if they have the syntax to do that, if they're really solid on a kind of a subject, verb, object pattern.
Have you guys looked her up? Because when I tried to look for, I thought, oh, wow, this is a great like collection of things that she put together for this short article. But then when I went to look for other books she wrote, it was a lot more.
There's a lot of sort of professional development stuff. A lot of what she writes, I like. I've seen her present. You know, I've hung out with her in Israel. I have a lot of respect for her in some ways, but I do have a cultural presence. It was a paper I wrote on conversation styles, and the whole thing was inspired by something she wrote that I violently disagreed with. I think, like some of the other researchers in this book, she probably has not been in the classroom recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, just and I think she's also tired. But to give somebody a sentence of she, like make a sentence with leave in the past tense, it's harder. It's certainly a more advanced application than just turning leave into left. But I don't know if I would call it critical thinking, right?
Right.
Should we keep the rooms open or go back? Well, I think we're going to go back. We can see
26 seconds.
Okay. And trying to think. So, the difference between moist and damp, that's not really critical thinking as it is vocabulary knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So some of the exercises, I'm not saying they were bad exercises, but I did not think all of them were critical thinking exercises.